In an interview with PC Gamer, Nate Simpson, creative director of Kerbal Space Program 2, unveiled some new details of the upcoming multiplayer mode of the game. There is also some new information on colonies and some up until now unseen footage we will discuss in this video as well, so stick around until the end. Hello everybody and welcome! KSP2 is going to release into early access on February 24th, 2023. While not available right then and there, the developers already seem to know where multiplayer should be headed. Basically, they will introduce space agencies to the game. This means that players could work together cooperatively to reach a common goal, or they could choose to play as different agencies placed on different locations of the planet in a more competitive fashion. Yes, this means space races will be a thing in KSP2. Players could, for instance, compete with each other which agency will reach the moon first. Whether or not this is something players would have to roleplay themselves or if the game will provide mission goals for agencies to reach is not yet known. Since multiplayer is going to be the final installment of the early access roadmap, expect quite some time to pass before we will be able to test this out. Another thing Nate Simpson talked about in the interview in more detail than he did before is resource collection and distribution between colonies. The main goal of having colonies is going to be supply lines between them so you can transport resources from one planet or even star system to another. KSP2 players will, for instance, be able to build a resource collecting rover, gather the things you need, return to the colony, and then automate this so you don't have to babysit it all the time. That takes care of the mining and collecting, but there will also be supply routes between colonies that can be established. The core of this information was already published in a PC Gamer article back in May 2020, but back then it wasn't really clear that different planets will have different resources or maybe just a different distribution of resources, which makes this all the more interesting. What was not said in the interview but mentioned in an article based on it is that currency will no longer be part of the game. Instead, the different resources should provide enough of a challenge for players to make good use of the supply line system, or what they call it, delivery routes. Next, let's talk about the new footage we saw during Nate's interview with PC Gamer. Some of the in-game clips are taken directly from the early access feature episode, but there are others as well. Remember when I told you Nate mentioned in a Q&A session with me that some on the team were building Formula 1 style vehicles with the procedural wings? Well, we got to see one of them now in appropriate British racing green livery. We can see the suspension of the new wheel part working while the jet car is speeding across the sands. We can also see it driving across the runway and clipping parts of the wheel through the surface. Well, I guess old KSP habits die hard. Before the rover, we also got a closer look inside the Mark III cockpit with full crew inside and how their little heads bob around when the plane changes direction. And we got our best look yet at the most recent iteration of the vehicle assembly building user interface. I talked about KSP2's UI in depth in a previous video, so please check that out for more details, because here I'm just going to focus on the things we haven't seen before. Mainly I want to talk about the bottom part of the screen. Here we can see an indicator showing us from which direction we are looking at our vehicle. Yes, it might be rather obvious for an airplane like this, but I can imagine some other vehicles or probes will not be that straightforward. Maybe we can even use that cube to, say, click on the front to have the camera dead on so we can check if our symmetry placement is good or not. Will that be the case? Well, we will see in February, when the game will become available in early access. Then next to the indicator we have a horizontal row of icons. Here is my interpretation of their uses from left to right. Switching from horizontal to vertical launch, undo, redo, the new color palette feature we talked about in a previous video, symmetry modes, place part mode, translate mode, move stuff around, Probably something to do with the new have multiple subassemblies in the same workspace feature we talked about previously. Link on top if you're interested. Then something where I'm pretty sure it is related to the build multiple subassemblies in the same VAB feature. See that green icon above the cockpit? It indicates that this is the part that will launch. So I would assume this new icon here lets the player decide which of different variants of a rocket they want to launch this time. Think Atlas V in its many configurations. Okay, and the next three are obvious. Center of thrust, center of mass, center of lift. In a segment next to that we probably have checklist, staging, action groups. This might be the delivery route feature Nate talked about. Probably the alarm clock feature, settings, and crew selection. What do you think? What is your interpretation of these icons down on the bottom? Let me know in the comments below. In the footage shown in the interview with PC Gamer, we can also see the procedural wing feature in action a bit longer, including what effect it has on your plane when you build it as stupidly as possible as was done here. On purpose, I presume, because later we see almost exactly the same plane flying without problem, and with a few different colors. Also note how beautiful the ocean looks in the background here behind the dunes. You can see the color gradient from light blue to dark blue back to the horizon. Really nice attention to detail there. But let's get back to the initial piece of news. Space races. What is your plan for KSP2 multiplayer? Are you going to play cooperatively with friends? Or will you go the competitive route, see who reaches the moon or Duna first? Let me know in the comments or let's have a chat about that on my Discord server. Link is in the description.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.